So after I saw all this stuff about the gag orders, I thought, that's really weird. Because if you remember, I told you that I had a source who was actually on the ground the day that Charlie was shot, somebody who was in law enforcement.
Really?
And I basically knew a lot of the things before it ever hit the news. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so outspoken about this, because it hasn't made any sense at all. Well, I got to thinking, I remember my source telling me something about how they were trying to keep everybody very tight-lipped. And so I went back through our messages and I found this. So on September 27th, my source said, "I can't talk about it yet. Admin is on high alert about leaks. Blank advised anyone leaking information about this case would receive heavy reprimand." And I said, "I'm convinced this was a hit, dude. This Tyler Patsy thing stinks to high heaven." So everyone is being very tight-lipped. Oh, for sure, bro. Once I got on scene, I could tell something was very wrong. He verified with UVU officers at UVU campus, that Charlie's team wouldn't coordinate with them regarding security, which I thought was really weird. Now, I don't know the exact protocol with this. I don't know if this is a normal thing. Is it not weird that the guest security wouldn't coordinate with the officers on campus? Like, is it not weird that they wouldn't coordinate with local officers? Is that just a normal thing? I don't know. But I just thought it was really weird.
So this guy, Ian at Stir, you see it, he says there's proof that Charlie Kirk Security told local law enforcement that they didn't need to work with them, and that over a month ago, local law enforcement officers and everyone involved were already being told to stay quiet. That's a month before these official gag orders happened. So it's about a fair trial for Tyler. So, just to let you know, there's a huge gag order. One of the most unprecedented gag orders in history is being put on the Charlie Kirk case. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
By a suspect judge. So I mean, how many more things can a certain powerful entity do behind the scenes to conspire before we get to call it a conspiracy? How many? So let's watch this guy. He's got a great... so he actually knows some cops that were on the ground there, and listen to what he says.
Now, truth be told, this part you've probably already seen. It happened yesterday. However, I can guarantee you didn't see the part that follows.
This is bad. This is real bad. Even mainstream media is calling this one of the most secretive trials in history. The judge is making everything secret with gag orders, including the police reports and 3,000 witnesses, associates, or anyone that knew Charlie Kirk. They're saying effectively any talk show host that knew him or talked to him was under gag order.
Sorry guys, been sick a couple days and saw this yesterday, but I wanted to verify that it was actually real because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But alas, it's real. Watch this.
There is a substantial amount of discovery in this case, Your Honor. It's voluminous, to say the least.
His lawyers entered their formal appearance and declined to waive his right to a preliminary hearing. Judge Tony Graff has issued a gag order preventing anyone associated with the case from talking about it. It's to avoid pretrial publicity, already a big problem. A case with massive media exposure involving a high-profile figure like Charlie Kirk, but the judge wants to ensure a fairer trial for Robinson. It's also brought up a big issue involving thousands of people.
So this is real. Here are the actual gag orders. You can read them right here. Just hold down and screenshot. So after I saw all this stuff about the gag orders, I thought, that's really weird. Because if you remember, I told you that I had a source who was actually on the ground the day that Charlie was shot, somebody who was in law enforcement.
Really?
And I basically knew a lot of the things before it ever hit the news. And so that's one of the reasons why I've been so outspoken about this, because it hasn't made any sense at all. Well, I got to thinking, I remember my source telling me something about how they were trying to keep everybody very tight-lipped. And so I went back through our messages and I found this. So on September 27th, my source said, "I can't talk about it yet. Admin is on high alert about leaks. Blank advised anyone leaking information about this case would receive heavy reprimand." And I said, "I'm convinced this was a hit, dude. This Tyler Patsy thing stinks to high heaven." So everyone is being very tight-lipped. Oh, for sure, bro. Once I got on scene, I could tell something was very wrong. And I was thinking about our conversation. I was thinking about a couple of other things he was talking about. And I remembered that one of the things he was also talking about was the fact that he verified with UVU officers at UVU campus, that Charlie's team wouldn't coordinate with them regarding security, which I thought was really weird. Now, I don't know the exact protocol with this. I don't know if this is a normal thing. Is it not weird that the guest security wouldn't coordinate with the officers on campus? Like, is it not weird that they wouldn't coordinate with local officers? Is that just a normal thing? I don't know. But I just thought it was really weird. All the people who have called people like me crazy for saying that there's far more to this than just what they're telling us. It might be time to start considering that maybe you're wrong. Because I'll tell you what, if you want to convince people that there's nothing weird going on with this assassination, if you want to convince them that there are no conspiracy theories and that it really is just what you're telling them, you don't put gag orders on every single person that was involved in it, including all 3,000 of the attendees. You just don't do that. But see, that's what's been done. And so, once again, I'll tell you, there's definitely more to this assassination than we think. We just witnessed our modern-day JFK.
On the afternoon of September 10th, 2025, an ordinary public appearance became an extraordinary tragedy. What was intended as a debate, a speech, or a public engagement at Orem, Utah, instead ended with a fatal attack that sent shock through the building, the city, and the nation. That single moment, a burst of violence in a place designed for dialogue, instantly transformed a local campus event into a national story with political and social repercussions. The death of Charlie Kirk touched many communities, his allies and critics, young activists who had been influenced by his work, and ordinary citizens who felt that a public forum had been violated in the worst possible way. The emotional impact was immediate: grief, anger, confusion, and a desperate hunger for reliable facts. The first hours after the shooting were chaotic. Attendees scrambled for safety, first responders rushed in, ambulances crossed the campus, phones lit up with frantic messages and shaky video. In the vacuum of confirmed information, rumors filled the gaps. The mechanics of what happened, where the shooter was positioned, how many shots were fired, and whether others were involved, were unclear. Officials moved quickly to secure the site and begin an investigation, but the public's need for answers outpaced what police could responsibly release without undermining the integrity of the inquiry. That tension between speed and accuracy has defined much of the story since. Beyond the immediate human tragedy, the assassination raised pressing questions about the safety of public events, the responsibilities of venue operators and security contractors, and the broader political context that had made the speaker and the audience so charged. Kirk was a polarizing figure. His presence drew large crowds and strong feelings. That made the event both a high-stakes staging and a prime target for those seeking to make a political statement with violence. In that sense, the shooting was not merely an act of criminal violence. It was an attack on a kind of public square where ideas are meant to be argued, debated, and contested verbally rather than settled by bullets. The death also triggered instant institutional responses. Local law enforcement, state investigators, federal agencies, and campus officials all had to coordinate in real time. Managing such a large and politically sensitive investigation requires difficult trade-offs: protect potential evidence, secure witnesses, coordinate multi-agency operations, and keep the public informed without jeopardizing prosecutions. Those trade-offs are complicated further when the event involves high-profile people and national attention. In short order, the unsaid realities of investigation, seizure of devices, temporary sealing of records, witness protection, and careful handling of evidence became visible to the public as missing footage, delayed statements, and a series of legal steps that often look like secrecy rather than prudent procedure. For survivors and family, the human side remained painfully clear. A life was lost, and people who loved him were left with sorrow and questions. For the broader public, the assassination became a moment that tested institutions. Would police be able to find the perpetrator quickly and fairly? Would prosecutors make a case that could stand up in court? Would media coverage resist rumor in favor of evidence? Those institutional tests remain at the heart of the conversation because, in democracies, the process, how investigators and public leaders behave, matters as much as the substantive facts. The initial shock that followed September 10th has therefore evolved into an extended national reckoning about evidence, truth, and public trust. Suspect Tyler James Robinson, 22, was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and related counts. Within a relatively short period after the shooting, law enforcement identified and arrested a suspect, 22-year-old Tyler James Robinson. He was taken into custody and charged with aggravated murder and a suite of related offenses. An arrest in a high-profile killing brings immediate public relief. There is a person in custody, and the wheels of justice begin to turn. But arrests are not verdicts, and when events move quickly from tragedy to arrest, the public spotlight intensifies on how the case was developed and what evidence supports the charges. Public officials and investigators typically aim to balance two priorities in the immediate aftermath of an arrest: establish probable cause sufficient for lawful detention and preserve the integrity of an ongoing investigation that may include other lines of inquiry. Probable cause is a legal standard lower than proof beyond reasonable doubt. It allows police to detain a suspect while building a fuller case. In politically charged cases, the transition from probable cause to prosecutorial proof is often contested, because suspicion and presumption can harden into public verdicts before the courts have a chance to evaluate evidence carefully. The arrest triggered both acceptance and skepticism. For some members of the public, the quick apprehension signified effective policing. Tips followed up, technology leveraged, and a suspect located. For others, the speed raised concerns that investigators had settled on a narrative too quickly. Those concerns were amplified by later disclosures, missing footage, withheld materials, and media patterns that seemed to harden a story before the full record was public. In the courtroom, the prosecutor's job is to assemble admissible evidence: witness statements, ballistics, DNA, phone records, surveillance, and any confession or incriminating communications. The defense's role is to test that evidence and expose weaknesses, alternative explanations, or procedural missteps. The public often sees only abbreviated updates, which can leave the impression of certainty where the law requires careful proof. Robinson's arrest also raised questions about motive and intent. Prosecutors at the time sought to present a narrative that linked the suspect to the weapon and to an intent to kill. They framed the charges to reflect the gravity of the act. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, are likely to probe for gaps. Where is the incontrovertible ballistic link? Are there alternative suspects or missing camera angles? Was there any procedural lapse in handling evidence? Those are the questions that will be litigated, and they will determine whether the quick arrest leads to a conviction or whether doubts place the case under renewed scrutiny. In the court of public opinion, the polarizing nature of the deceased and the charged atmosphere make objectivity difficult. In the court of law, due process must be given its full measure. Throughout, families and the community seek not only justice but also answers. For the deceased's loved ones, the legal mechanisms are ways to find closure and accountability. For the community, the case raises systemic questions about public safety, the preparedness of venues, coordination among agencies, and whether quick arrests reflect completeness or a premature end to inquiry. Each of these dimensions, legal, procedural, communal, will shape how the case and its aftermath are interpreted for months and years to come. Compounding the perception of secrecy were reports that the gag orders were unusually expansive, that they touched not only witness testimony but also certain police reports and communications, and that roughly 3,000 attendees at the event were effectively under restrictions about what they could publicly discuss. If accurate, that scope would be extraordinary. It casts a wide net over a large number of people who might possess first-hand observations, photos, or videos of the incident. The legal mechanics of such broad restraints are complex. Courts can issue orders preventing the disclosure of specific types of evidentiary materials, raw police reports that list unvetted witness statements, ongoing investigative leads, or sealed forensic materials, to protect the integrity of an investigation. But when orders sweep in event attendees en masse, the policy rationale must be robust. Judges must demonstrate that wide disclosure would pose a real and substantial threat to the administration of justice. Otherwise, the orders risk being challenged as overbroad and infringing on First Amendment protections. From the perspective of event attendees, being constrained from speaking about what they saw is emotionally fraught. Many in the crowd filmed the incident on their phones or posted clips to social media. For witnesses, the instinct is to share, to help, or to speak about what they experienced. Being told to stop raises tensions. Are they being silenced to preserve evidence, or are they being shielded from scrutiny? The court's duty is to balance those tensions. Best practice requires the court to provide clear, narrowly tailored orders and to allow for practical pathways whereby defense counsel and prosecutors can access the materials under protective orders while the public receives sanitized, verified summaries that do not compromise the trial. For the public, the large number of attendees implicated by the order reinforces suspicions about institutional control. When thousands of people are subject to silence, the sense of exclusion widens. The event becomes the property of an investigatory apparatus that speaks only in fragments. That outcome is politically dangerous. It can create a durable narrative of concealment. The judiciary and law enforcement can blunt that reaction by demonstrating rigorous procedures, chain of custody logs, limited sealing of only the most sensitive materials, and scheduled declassification of materials as legal risk diminishes. Without that follow-through, the broad gag orders will be remembered as a key driver of mistrust rather than as a protective legal tool. Anonymous source warned September 27th about admin, high alert, and leak reprimands. Adding an intrigue of its own, reports circulated that an anonymous source warned, on September 27th, of an admin, high alert, and of reprimands for anyone leaking information. In contested, high-profile investigations, anonymous tips and leaks are common currency. They can be whistleblowing that corrects official missteps, or they can be strategic messages intended to shape narrative and intimidate potential communicants. The specific charge that an internal admin was on high alert and that personnel were being reprimanded for leaks raises several implications. First, it suggests that investigators were aware of a risk, the risk that uncontrolled disclosures, whether from staff, contractors, or affiliated entities, could compromise the integrity of the investigation or taint potential jurors. Agencies often respond to such risks by tightening internal controls, reminding staff of legal obligations, and threatening disciplinary measures. That may be entirely legitimate. But second, the use of anonymous warnings in the public sphere has a chilling effect. It can be read as an attempt to deter whistleblowers, or, depending on one's viewpoint, as a signal that the investigation is properly guarding fragile leads. The timing of the anonymous warning, weeks after the assassination, matters too. By late September, public frustration had grown over perceived opacity. A cryptic message about admin, high alert fed public imagination. Were officials disciplining people who posted relevant video clips? Were contractors prevented from sharing footage that could clarify timelines? Those are hard questions to answer without access to internal communications and the authority to compel production of logs, authority typically exercised via court process in criminal probes. The presence of an anonymous warning also illustrates how modern investigations contain multiple channels of information, official statements, court filings, media leaks, and social media chatter. Each channel has its own credibility calculus. Anonymous claims can be true, partially true, or deliberately misleading. Responsible investigators should address such claims head-on by explaining their internal procedures for safeguarding evidence, clarifying what constitutes an unlawful leak, and offering channels for lawful reporting of misconduct. Silence in the face of anonymous allegations only amplifies suspicion. Conversely, careful public explanation about why certain materials are sealed and how whistleblowing would be handled can restore some trust. Security reportedly did not coordinate with UVU officers before the event. One line of inquiry with immediate practical implications concerns security coordination. Reports suggested that private event security and the organizers did not coordinate thoroughly with Utah Valley University officers before the event. If true, that lapse points to a systemic vulnerability. When private security contractors, event organizers, and campus police fail to synchronize plans, gaps appear in access control, rooftop monitoring, and response protocols. Large events require layered planning. The gold standard is a pre-event meeting involving campus police, local law enforcement, venue security, and event organizers to map access points, identify no-go zones, designate radio channels, and assign personnel to critical areas like rooftops and backstage access. That coordination should also include a plan for emergency communication and rapid medical response. When that coordination is absent or perfunctory, assumptions about who is responsible for what can lead to blind spots. For example, a private security team might assume campus police will patrol rooftop access while campus police assume the contractor has closed all potential approaches. The result is gaps that a determined attacker could exploit. The allegation of poor coordination also raises questions about credentialing and venue control. How were rooftop access points secured? Were there lockouts or temporary barriers? Were spotters assigned to scan likely vantage points? Event organizers should produce records, contracts with security vendors, pre-event checklists, communication logs such as radio transcripts, and staffing rosters. If such records are incomplete or missing, it will be difficult to argue that the event was reasonably protected. That failure, in turn, can become a focal point for calls for institutional reform, standardized requirements for security at high-profile campus events, mandated coordination with campus police, and stricter vetting of private security firms.